Well, hey guys, how are you doing? Good morning. So an amazing thing happened to me this morning. Jesus woke me up. I was laying in bed and I felt like a very gentle shaking. And so I heard, "This is the end, my child. This is the end." And he said it again, "This is the end, my child. This is the end." And then he said, "You are my vine." I didn't know what that meant, but I looked it up, and it said the true vine is an allegory or parable given by Jesus in the New Testament, found in John 15, 1 through 17. It describes Jesus' disciples as branches of himself. And then it says the true vine who represents Jesus and the fruit's vital life source, and the branches who represent the disciples and who determine the result of fruit. And then I found something that was really cool. It said vines can be fragrant, colorful, fruiting, attract hummingbirds and butterflies. I thought that was cute. Anyway, so that was just so sweet of Jesus. And so then he said he wanted me to talk about my life story. I have no idea why, but he wants me to talk about from the very beginning until the end. And he said this was the end. So I feel like it's very soon. I claim that Jesus Christ is God. He's the Son of God. He came to earth in the flesh. He bled on the cross. He rose on the third day, and he was born of a virgin. Ignore the people trying to impersonate my account on YouTube. I only have one account. Okay, so I'm gonna switch hands because it gets a little tiring. But okay, so my life story. Okay, I've already done a salvation story, but it didn't have like the ending, so I guess he just wants the ending. So basically when I was little, I grew up, we didn't really go to church or anything, but I do remember Jesus reminding me how we used to play together when I was a child. Like I would pretend I was God's daughter and I could snap my fingers and disappear. And I didn't even know Jesus. I guess I knew him in my heart, but it's not something we did. We didn't go to church or anything like that growing up. We did go like on Easter Sunday or something. That's kind of how we were as a family. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister. I was the baby of the family. My sister, she's no longer with us. She passed away in 2019. But so he told me to talk about how the neighbors growing up introduced me, and I don't really remember them, but he said this morning, because he gave me like a whole thing of what to talk about, but he said talk about how they started giving me they started telling me who Christ was. And I don't really remember because I was a very young child, but I do remember playing hide and go seek with Jesus and just like loving him as a child, even though I didn't know him. And I do remember reading the Bible some and but that's really all I remember, so I guess it like stuck in somehow. And oh, Jesus clock. I'll wait till it's done. Excuse me. Anyway, so then growing up, I always wanted to be a singer, actress, dancer, and a model. I pursued those things when I was little, and ever since like Barbizon modeling school, and just I didn't have a lot of confidence. So my mom, one day for Christmas, she got me the whole Barbizon modeling school thing, and that gave me like poise and lots of confidence. And so I've just kind of been pursuing that whole entertainment industry thing for a long time. And basically I always knew Jesus was in my heart, because even though like I didn't understand everything as far as like who he was, because I hadn't called on him yet, I can see now how he was leading my entire journey from when I was a child all the way up until I was an adult. And so I was pursuing music. I would join like the school plays and stuff. I would be recording. I used to babysit for studio time, And I got an opportunity to go to New York City. I went to college for like a little bit, but music was always my heart. And I always felt like God gave me the gift of singing and writing. And so I went to New York City to pursue it. But the Lord reminded me that I defended him and I didn't know him. So, I don't want to like talk about anything bad about people, but I didn't have like a great experience in New York. I was with a very controlling producer and all that stuff, and it wasn't a good experience. I didn't really have Jesus in my life. So I remember like, it was sad a lot of times. I would just kind of walk around Manhattan and cry a lot, and listen to music and everything, and didn't know the Lord was with me the whole time. Well, I do remember this one time where the person, my music producer, he was talking to me about God. And I defended Jesus, and I said, no, God exists. And he goes, well, how do you know? And I was like, I don't know, I just know. And so even though I didn't know him, I feel like I did know him, if that makes sense. Well, so I didn't have a great experience. I had to pack everything up and leave everything behind in New York. Just basically, one of my experiences was, I ended up dating the music producer, when I was young. I was very naive and very trusting. And so I trusted everything, and just wasn't a good situation. And so I found myself where I had to flee really quickly, without getting into like all the personal details. I feel like the Lord was protecting me there. He got me out just in time. So I kind of left everything behind. I packed up whatever I could find in the apartment in my car. Drove. I didn't drive, but my brothers came to get me and helped me pack up my apartment. And so I left music. I was like pop R&B. They were trying to make me into something that I wasn't. It wasn't my style or anything like that, and it just wasn't a good situation. I could feel the devil all around it, and so it was time to go. Well, I didn't give up on music. As soon as I got to South Carolina, I started recording. I was working as a waitress, and I would just pay money, to go in the studio and stuff from whatever I made as a waitress, and always felt like God gave me this gift, and I wanted to, share it with the world because he gave it to me. And so the Lord reminded me that I got off track. As I was recording and stuff, I dated a guy who actually, his mom led me to salvation. But I got off track and I moved to North Carolina for just a little bit. And the Lord was like, no, that's not happening. So, and this was before, I think this was after I was saved. I was actually listening to the Holy Spirit at that point. But he brought me back. There's like this contest with Sony Music and stuff, and I auditioned, and when I auditioned, I sang, and I felt the wind blow, and then I got chosen, and it was called the Pride of Carolinas. And anyway, so that brought me back to South Carolina, where I needed to be on track. And so back to my salvation story. I know I'm kind of like all over the place trying to get everything out, but I was working in, there was like this, like I said, I always wanted to be like an actor, model kind of thing, and singer. So I would do like little side jobs and stuff, and did this like audition where it would hook me up and do like little odd jobs, like modeling for like Home Depot had this little thing where we had a display of products or something, and like, so I was there, and there were these two people talking about Jesus. And I didn't know Jesus yet because I hadn't been saved. This was 2 years before I got saved. And I remember going up to them and I was like, oh, I'm a good person. I think I'll make it to heaven. And Jesus, well, not Jesus, the guy didn't say much, but he told me, he went out to his car And he said he came back 15 minutes later and he said, "I'm so sorry, but God would not let me leave you. Literally, he made me come in and tell you you can't make it to heaven based on good deeds." And I thought the guy was kind of crazy. I'm not going to lie, I thought he was crazy. Because, I didn't know the Lord then. And he said he felt like his heart was going to fall out of his chest. That is how much Jesus was trying to reach me at that point. And I was 26 years old. So I started dating somebody after that. And I may have dated them before. I can't remember the exact timeline. But one day I asked his mom, it was 2 years later, and I was like, "How do I know if I'm going to make it to heaven?" And she said, "Well, let's just nail it down right now." So I went into the bedroom with her and I got on my knees and I prayed to Jesus and I confessed he was Lord. She called it the ABCs: admitted it, believed, and confessed that he was Lord, and confessed your sins, admitted that you were a sinner and asked him to take away your sins. And, I didn't understand everything at the time, but I do remember after I called on Jesus that day and I walked outside, the wind blew and I felt it in my spirit. It was like a different kind of wind. It was very, very peaceful, and I just felt God's love. And so, my journey, hasn't been that great, but the Lord has told me he chose me for these things because he said I never once denied him. I went through a lot, there were things in my childhood that I went through, and I never blamed Jesus for it. My New York experience when I had to pack up everything in my car because I was threatened, my life, I never blamed Jesus for it. And I just always felt he was there with me. And so after I got saved, my journey was never done. Your journey's never done. You can always see your walk with Christ, and, started going to church and everything like that, and just still kind of going through the motions. The seed was there, it was planted, I was saved, but it hadn't grown yet. I wasn't growing enough. I didn't understand the Bible very well. I would read it. I'd try to read it, and I'd end up falling asleep. But anyway, I started growing with the Lord, and I did date a lot because I was looking for love. I always end up dating the wrong guy who always ended up, hurting me or doing something that just wasn't Christ-like, and just always fell for the wrong person. So let's see, where do I want to go from here? So I was pursuing music, and still why I was dating around, and then finally I was 30, I was 31, but I'd finally just prayed, and this was after my Nashville experience. So basically, from my experience, I went from pursuing music my whole life as a child, plays, all that, to recording in New York City as a pop R&B artist, to being an adult contemporary artist in South Carolina, working with local musicians in South Carolina, and then submitted my stuff to Nashville and got signed in Nashville, but took a lot of money, and the money just basically ran out. My father, he supported my dream. He was very, very involved in my dream, and he just supported it financially, but he also supported it in love. And my mom, the same thing. So I was very fortunate for that. Instead of going to a 4-year college, I went 2 years, but instead of going to 4-year, I used that college money for my music. And so I asked Jesus one day, this was after I was done with Nashville. I met Michael Bloom, who's my music producer, and there was this audition that I did online, and he ended up not choosing me for this show called Bus Stops, but he liked me as an artist. He felt like I had a lot of talent, and he thought I'd be great with the label. So they were Solaris Entertainment, and they were backed by Sony as well. And so I'll drink some coffee. After my experience in Nashville and got pretty far, the Lord never let me go all the way. He had different plans for me, but he let me get really far. Like, my first single in Nashville, I was like top 80 on Music Row, and God was with me this whole time. I mean, like, I remember in the hotel room, that was in 2014, I was praying and thanking Jesus for all his opportunities and getting me to Nashville and everything, and was really doing well, on the radio and all that, my first single, and was just excited to finally be doing my dream. And I fell asleep in my Bible, and the Lord gave me a rapture dream. I was always kind of like hearing Jesus before that. Like, there would be like little times where, I'd be behind someone at a Starbucks and I'd heard the Holy Spirit say, hey, pay for that person's meal and tell them that I love them. Or, at a restaurant, same thing. I had to like pay for somebody's bill, and then I had needed money for my car payment. And then Jesus the next day, gave me the exact money that I needed because I trusted him in faith. And I've always been childlike faith and walked in faith. And so Jesus has no favorites. He has no favorites. He pours his favor out on some people, but he has no favorites. He loves everyone the same. But he let me know why he chose me to be a prophet. And not everyone understands everything. I didn't at first. Sorry, this is killing me. I can't speak. I took like an allergy pill this morning, and I don't know, for some reason I'm losing my voice. I rebuke you, devil. In Jesus' name, I rebuke you. Okay, better. All right, so back to my story. Basically, I knew Jesus at this point. I was reading his word. I was praying to him. I had a lot of childlike faith. And I believed I was right in the direction he wanted me to go to. So I fell asleep in my Bible, and he gave me a rapture dream. And in my dream, I was singing on stage, and I knew I was at the Greer Fest. And it's interesting. I don't know why he let me know I was at the Greer Fest, but that was the day that I got engaged, which was August 24th. Now, I had said in a previous video, April, because I got confused. April's when I met Daniel. And for some reason, my dates got messed up, so I apologize for that. But August 24th was when I got engaged in 2014. When the Lord gave me a dream, February 2014. I think it was February 18th or 19th of 2014. And Jesus descended from heaven. He overpowered the crowd. Before Jesus came down, I was looking at myself singing on stage. But then I was in the crowd looking at someone else sing on stage. And at the time, I was like, oh, the Lord's going to bless me in music, this is exciting. I didn't even understand it was a rapture dream at the time. And it got really loud, and people were screaming Jesus' name because he just towered over everybody. And I guess that's what he means by countenance in the sky. But he had beautiful blue eyes. And he was in spirit. People say in the Bible, say that he wasn't good looking. I'm going to tell you, he was gorgeous. And it's because he was in his heavenly glorious body. It's perfect. And he had perfect straight white teeth. And he smiled. And he put his arms out. And he had hair probably about here. And it looks like he had golden highlights shining through his hair. But it was like the sun, and he was in this white robe. And the love that I felt in the dream was so beautiful. It's just something that I cannot explain. And so as the crowd was screaming Jesus and he descends, he literally picks me up. He puts his arms around me, and it felt like we were spinning like a merry-go-round. And then as we were going up, there were letters in the sky afterwards, and it said, the clouds parted, because it got very ominous that day. The clouds parted, and it said, follow me and you will go up. So that was 2014. That was like so exciting to me. I woke up and I started to cry, and I was so excited. I called my friend Elizabeth, who was kind of like my spiritual mentor at that time. And I was like, oh my gosh, the Lord gave me a dream, and I'm right where I need to be in Nashville, and like music and all that stuff. So Jesus never let me get to the top. He let me have my dream and pursue it and get really, really close. And then right when I was about to break through, he would stop it. And I just kept following him. And I just kept pursuing it because I felt like in my heart it's something that he wanted me to do. And so after that, let's see, I had that dream. So then I left Nashville. I was like, I'd go back and forth, you know. So that was in 2014, but I was done with Nashville like the end of 2017, early 2018. And that's when Michael Bloom came along, and that was when I auditioned for that TV show. So I started working in the studio again, still working with Jesus, or not working, praying to Jesus and going to church and everything. And then I got an opportunity to sing at church, which was great because I never really had an opportunity to sing at church. And I just loved it so much. I would, get on stage and sing and just worship the Lord. And it was just so cool. Why I was still pursuing music and being a server. I was a server for 14 years, and I realized that all of these things that I went through in life was to build me up to where I am now, to have a very strong mind and to be able to take anything. Because, when I was little in high school, there were girls that bullied me. There was a girl mad because the senior liked me and I was a freshman, and literally wrote all over the bathroom wall about like horrible things about me that weren't true. That was like one experience. And then when I worked as a service industry, I was kind of like the light there. Everybody was into like really like hardcore partying and drugs and all that stuff, and I followed Jesus. I didn't do that. And so I don't know, I just seemed like more of like an outcast, and I had some really mean girls. I had one person like key my car there, and just lots of things, but it made me stronger. I remember leaving the restaurant and I'd be crying a lot. I'd be like, Lord, please, like, get me out of here. What are you doing? I'd pray to him, but he told me, he said, you never blamed me for anything and you never doubted. So I continued my walk with Jesus through all that. And finally, it was like right before COVID, the Lord put in my heart to do real estate. And I was scared, to be honest. I didn't know anything about real estate. I've never done anything but sing my whole life and work in the service industry. So I was a little nervous, but I felt God's presence with me. And so I stepped out on faith. And the music industry kind of shut down some because of COVID anyway. So I stepped out on faith and I did really well. Like in 6 months, I got like 6 sales, and I know it was because of Jesus. And he blessed me right away. I was like rookie of the year, and I literally just trusted him to provide. And it was scary because I've never done anything but sing, but he was with me the whole time. And then going back track a little bit, before I stepped out on real estate, I want to talk about my experience with my dad. So about the end of Nashville, this was when I was with Michael Bloom. I was auditioning for a management company. My dad had pancreatic cancer. They caught it early. He had stage 4 cancer for a long time, but it was in remission for 10 years. And then he got a new cancer, which was pancreatic cancer. Well, he had the Whipple procedure because they caught it early, and everything was good. I was with him 5 days in the hospital in Charleston, and then I had an audition in Nashville, and my dad told me to go, and I was like, no, I can cancel. I don't want to leave you. And my dad was like, no, I want you to go, my child. I want you to go. And I say my child because I was so used to Jesus speaking. But he said no, he wanted me to go. My dad loved me so much. And so I went. And then on the way home, there were complications. My dad's heart stopped because the fluid that built up, they didn't get the doctor in time, and the fluid built up after the operation. All of a sudden, he went from like pain level 5 to a 10 right away. And my mom called and said there's been some complications. He's on a breathing machine. So I was driving home from Nashville. I was like 5 hours away from Charleston, and I pulled over. I cried and I prayed to Jesus for 20 minutes. And I just poured my heart out to him. I let Michael had to use the restroom, so I let him do his thing, and I sat there and I prayed the entire time. And not even 45 minutes later, I was in the car, and this movie screen popped in front of me. And I could see my dad in ICU. I could see him laying there. And I remember seeing this white angel-looking figure. Now, I said Jesus, but I don't remember Jesus being in there. I just remember a white angel-looking figure. And when the angel lifted up, like, I felt my stomach drop. And everything the angel did, I felt, because, I got motion sickness and stuff. And I'm still driving the car, and I'm literally telling Michael everything that is happening. I'm like, it was an out-of-body vision experience, and I guess an angel took over the car. I know it sounds crazy, but that's why you have to truly walk in the Spirit. That was like the first really like supernatural thing other than that 2014 dream. And I watched him laying there, and I felt his soul, I felt everything in the spiritual realm. And then when the angel got on top of him and he lifted up, it felt like, and they flew away, it felt like a dark, cold room with no soul in it. And I remember saying to Michael, I said, Michael, I was like, my dad is dying. Jesus is in the room with him. And as I watched them fly away, not even like 30 seconds later, my mom called and said, Mandy. And I was like, Mom, I know, I just saw it. And I'm not sure my family really believed, but I know Michael did, because Michael literally saw it all happen in the car with me. And then he watched me get the phone call. And that just blew his mind. And then I was crying. Obviously, I just lost my dad. And I finally pulled over and let Michael drive. And that was really hard for me. That was like right after that happened, that's when I went out to real estate. And it was like, my supporter, and then COVID happened. And then I was just like, okay, so but before that, I lost a baby in 2019. I think it was 2019. It was like right before COVID. And then 2021. So I had all that happen. My dad died, lost a baby. And the Lord, the second time, I think it was the second time, he spoke the name Asher to me when I was pregnant, which was really amazing. I thought he was just naming the baby. I didn't even know what Asher meant. And so I ended up losing that one, and I didn't understand. I remember crying and laying there and praying to Jesus and asking him, why would you name my baby and then take him? But I know God had other plans, He had me with Daniel for a good while. I was very spiritual. Daniel was more intellectual, and he was more like looking at the facts, reading the Bible. And I would read the Bible, but I would always go to Jesus, and I would always ask him, what does this mean? And my childlike faith, I was just like a kid with my childlike faith. And Jesus, says in the Bible, you inherit the kingdom of heaven when you come like a child. So I was always like a child. And so we were on two different paths for a while. There was a lot of other things in our marriage, but the Lord said I didn't have to speak about that I can just keep it simple. So I'm not going to get into all that, but we had some good times, and then we had some bad times, like any other marriage. So after those supernatural things, I decided to take off work one day. I was in real estate and I could pretty much make my own schedule. So I just took off work that day. I didn't answer calls. I didn't hang out with clients, nothing. And I worshiped the Lord all day long. This was December 29th. I worshiped the Lord and I wrote 2 songs for him. I literally got in the kitchen and I remember praying and worshiping to him, and felt like I could see Jesus' feet and I was bowing at his feet. That is how much I loved him, and I was just worshiping him. And all day long I did that. And then that night I was laying in bed and I felt the Lord grab my hand. This has never happened before. I felt him grab my hand really tight. And then he started giving me a message. And it blew my mind. Nothing ever happened like this before. He gave me a message. And then I said in my mind, I said, Lord, if this is you, I was like, you need to give me scripture, because I don't know if this is you or not. This was new to me. I didn't know what was going on. And so he gave me scripture. Like 11 scriptures or something like crazy. And I'm writing this down on my notepad while I'm laying in bed. And I told Daniel, I was like, Daniel, I said, the Lord literally just poured his spirit out on me, gave me a message and scriptures. He wasn't excited at all. It's almost like he didn't believe. But I had the message, and it was midnight. December 30th is when it happened. So here's the weird thing. So then I heard, so it's not an actual voice, it's thoughts of the Holy Spirit. I heard in my head, go post it now, it needs to be out now. So I did everything Jesus said. I was just blown away because I've never had an experience like that before. And I just started reading it, and then literally the more and more, the next day, I think he waited a couple days before he gave me another message, but I was just so blown away by that one. And he asked me to put it on Facebook and do like a live video on Facebook and tell the story. And I was like, Lord, they're going to make fun of me and they're not going to understand. And he had me do it, and I did. And when I did, literally he poured his fire out on me while I was driving. Literally tongues came, like heavenly tongues. It was like my mouth was open and I didn't even try to speak in tongues. They just poured out. And I felt his presence so strong. I remember calling my friend Shay and I was crying, and I knew it was Jesus, that he just took over. And then ever since then, he was giving me like a message like every day, almost. So I'd write down all these messages and I was getting all these prophecies. And, the very first date he spoke to me was Tu B'Shavat, which is when we had all those earthquakes in Turkey. And then he said something about February 15th. Well, every time he'd give me something, I'd get excited like a child. And I was like, are you kidding me? Is this the rapture? Like, he literally, as we were talking, I started to learn Jesus. It took me a long time to learn how he speaks, but he speaks in parables and he speaks in future. I didn't know that at the time. I was very young in my faith as far as like this whole walk with the Lord of prophecy. And so I didn't know how it went. And I was just trusting in Jesus and childlike faith. And then the first date went by and I was so convinced that this was it, because he spoke it to me and I know it was Jesus. And I didn't understand it at the time. And I was like, why would you give me that, Lord? And then have all this happen? Well, the whole thing with these prophecies was, it all lines up perfectly mathematically. That Andrew Jordan actually has done these dates. And he said he never would have gotten this pattern if God didn't speak these dates to me. So it was all for God's purpose and his glory to speak these dates. And so, of course, you had your naysayers and people coming against me saying, oh, you're a false prophet because you said the rapture was going to happen and it didn't happen, and all that stuff based on like Deuteronomy 18 or something like that. I don't know. I don't have anything memorized. But we can't understand everything God does because he does things in parts. So that started happening. All these prophecies started happening. Now, here's how Guillermo fits in. I didn't know Guillermo at all. But I remember, now that I know it was him, somebody messaged me on TikTok. And he said he was struggling because he knew that I was hearing from God. And he was following every word and prophecies. He was very respectful. He never hit on me. He was just a good, godly man. And he talked about his wife and how much he loved her and how much he wanted to share those things with her. But she was in the world, and how he would literally have to hide and go in the bathroom and watch prophecies and talk and watch videos on the rapture from her because she didn't get it. She didn't understand. She wanted a life in the world with him, and he had already committed himself to Jesus. And so the Lord literally gave him a family that he always wanted, a wife. And then like she had like lots of people in her family, because I'll let him explain his story because the Lord wants him to put out things too. But basically, he asked me to pray for his marriage. And so I did. But I didn't know who he was at the time. He even like emailed me, he said, and I never answered his emails. I didn't know who he was. So then, I think it was June 17th, the live happened. The Lord first put me together with Jess, because he started talking about twins, and then Cassie joined, and then McKenna, and then the Lord spoke some other names. I didn't know at the time, but the Lord had given me prophecies, all of this going down, and I didn't know that half the group was going to, not believe I was hearing from Jesus anymore. The thing is from the very beginning, the prophecies hasn't changed, and they haven't changed. They've been exactly the same as far as the way God speaks, how he does things with me, how he gives me dreams, how he gives me visions. He's given me every spiritual gift, okay? But it's because I believe. I believed without seeing. It's like childlike faith, and I never doubted him, he said. So then Guillermo got introduced in the picture. McKenna, after our live, we didn't get raptured and we did all those things, that Jesus asked us to do, gave us instructions and everything. It was all for his glory because he's very patient and he's waiting on people to realize that he finished it on the cross. And, I'm learning more and more through this whole journey. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to explain every little detail. But then McKenna introduced us on Zoom for the first time, and it was June 22nd. It's very interesting, right? So then I was like, okay. Didn't think anything of it. I was like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever. Then we all started Zooming that night. And the weird thing is, there was like a spiritual connection happening. And I never, I was married to Daniel. I've never thought anything like that. I've never done that in the past. And I wasn't insexual or anything like that. I didn't think any of those things. It was just like this very comfortable spiritual connection, and I couldn't explain it. But I felt bad about it, just talking to him and some of the people in the group. I could feel like my heart having some kind of draw towards him. I didn't understand why. So the next morning, I got on my knees. I started praying to Jesus. And I said, Jesus, I was like, I don't understand. I was like, I've never even looked at another man or anything like that, or had feelings towards anyone. Why is this happening? And of course I apologized, and I was like crying, and I was like, why am I feeling this spiritual connection? And the Lord shook me, and he gave me a message, and he gave me scriptures with it. But he said, he basically he said in a nutshell, the reason why I'm feeling this spiritual connection is because he brought it to me. And I don't have the exact words in front of me, but he talked about how he ordained us to be together and how we don't understand everything now, but it's going to make sense later. So it was crazy, because as I talked to him more and more on Zoom, it was like we fell in love. But we fell in love in such a beautiful, godly way. Like we would sit there and we would just talk. And with everybody on Zoom, and then, we'd have our like late night talks, but it was completely innocent. Jesus literally was there with us as we would like sit there and talk. And he would intervene like with thoughts. It's hard to explain, but he's been there and he's very, very connected this whole time. And, throughout the journey, it happened very, very quickly. So I didn't understand it at the time, but talking on the phone was our voice frequencies matching with heaven, because June 17th, when he said the Spirit, because you have to get the new wineskins and everything to be completed as one. I don't understand it all, but the way he explained it was that it catches up with the flesh. So right now, you felt that gravitational pull on the 17th if you had a spirit and you felt going like you went to heaven. And I had that dream, which was weird. It was either a dream or an out-of-body experience. I don't know, but it was right after the live. It was June 18th. I was laying in my bed. I woke up at 8 a.m. and it was so strong, like the gravity and everything. Like my head was dizzy. I remember taking Dobby out, and I don't do drugs, and I hardly ever drink. Okay, I would have like 1 or 2 drinks. You can ask Daniel. I've never been a big drinker. And then when I met Guillermo, I don't drink at all, because he used to have a problem with alcohol, so I don't drink at all. But anyway, so I remember walking outside, and I felt so dizzy. I was like, what is going on? So I laid my head back down on the pillow at 8 o'clock, and all of a sudden, I was sitting there on a couch I didn't recognize, and I said to myself, oh no, did I get left behind in my dream or am I out of vision? And then all of a sudden, I started floating up to Jesus. And I had Dobby in my hands, which was really strange, because Dobby had passed away. After that, he was 17, and I had to put him down because he got sick. And there was some horrible person that said I sacrificed him to Satan. That is the most horrible thing you can ever say, because anyone who knows me knows that I treated my animals like they were my children, because I had no kids. I mean, Dobby, I literally put a fan over him and tucked him in and put his head under the covers. He was spoiled. He took up half my bed. I slept in the crack so he could have half my bed. That's how much I loved that dog. And so I had to put him down because he was sick, and the vet said it was just time. His organs were failing. But anyway, sorry, I went on a tangent because Dobby really upset me. But there's a lot of evil things that people say, but I forgive them. They just don't know any better. But anyways, back to my dream. Dobby was with me, and then Jesus was with me. It literally felt like a magic carpet ride, which I don't pursue magic. I don't pursue sorcery or anything like that. But it literally felt like that. And then when I got to heaven, I kissed Jesus on the cheek, and he said, go wake up the children, my child. And so then I got around and I was like, look, guys, we're in heaven. And I'm like shaking the children. And then I get to Dobby, and he's laying on the mat. And I was like saying something. I was like, oh, well, Dobby can't see where we are. And he goes, Mandy, Jesus said to me, Mandy, Dobby can see. And I said, what? He can see? And Jesus made a joke, and he said, no, Mandy, he can't see. Jesus is very funny in the dream. So, and in real life, he makes jokes all the time. This is why he wants a relationship with his children, because people look at him like he's a God of laws and order, and he's so much more than that. Like, when you truly believe it was finished on the cross, and you truly invite him in your life, you have that Father daughter or son relationship with him, and he is just such a beautiful soul, and how much he loves us, and he jokes with us. And so anyway, in the dream he made a joke. Anyway, so then after that, the whole experience with Guillermo, nothing physically happened. Like I didn't physically, like, we didn't see each other, okay, until now. The Lord had me call him and align the planets over the phone, and that's just something you have to take to Jesus, but with the voice frequencies. And but Daniel and I, we were on the outs, basically. He didn't understand what was happening with Jesus, and it was a constant mockery all the time. It was very uncomfortable, and I couldn't share anything with them. Just the last few years, there was just like, we're just going through the motions, but I couldn't. I wanted to share things with him, like how God would pour out his spirit, and he just kept thinking it was a demon. And then the last straw was when he came on my live and said that, and kind of embarrassed me in front of everybody. I just felt betrayed after that. And that was kind of when he made his choice, with Jesus. Jesus, I think, was letting me know that he was giving him choices through this whole thing. And, Daniel's very strong-willed, strong-minded. So, he's one of those people that is always right. I love him as a person. And I cherished our moments we had together. We had some great moments together. And, for the most part, I think he was a pretty great husband. We just didn't see eye to eye on everything. And there were times where he wasn't so great. And, felt like he could never forgive me for a lot of things, pursuing my music and spending money on that. Now, some of those things I probably shouldn't have done, and I should have, been a little more submissive. But so I definitely take fault in that. But he never really got over that, so that our relationship didn't really grow because he kept bringing that up. But anyway, so it just the whole experience, we were at our end, and he said he wanted a divorce, but the Lord was waiting for it, literally. Hard to explain, but the Lord had that day mapped out from the beginning. I wanted to go to the lake with the girls, and Daniel put a guilt trip on me and said, no, I don't want you to go. I don't get to spend any time with you. And yeah, he felt neglected the last 6 months or so because he was mocking me. I didn't want to spend time with him because he was mocking me, and all I wanted to do was live for Jesus. So we had that. And then when he spoke those words, God showed me in Genesis 16 that when Sarai told Abram to sleep with Hagar, she tried to complain to God about it after he did it. And God said, no, you spoke it. So there were many things. And then like Ruth and Boaz got married based on like a purchase or something, and he spoke it, that's my wife. So God was showing me things that when you're truly walking in the Spirit, and when he ordains something together and he speaks it to existence, then you are married in his eyes. I don't know if it's just one of those things that it's hard to explain. That's why you have to always take everything to Jesus. But I did ask Jesus. I said, Jesus, because he gave me a message, and he said we were married in the Spirit and in the flesh. And I haven't even met Guillermo yet, but he gave me this message. And I didn't really understand it yet, but then I know it had something to do with the voice frequencies, because God spoke the earth into existence. And so then June 27th, and the reason how I know it's June 27th is because I asked the Lord, I was like, when did you marry Guillermo and I together? And he said June 27th, and I didn't understand why he said June 27th. But I went back and I found a Zoom, June 27th, and it was with everybody, the group. And then at the very end, I talked about how the Lord gave me a vision that day, and he did. So I was worshiping, I was just worshiping where I drive, and I got to the gas station, I closed my eyes, and I was praying and worshiping and singing, and all of a sudden I got visions of me and Guillermo in heaven. We're brushing our teeth together. We were standing on the balcony looking over the beach, walking down the beach, and I don't know if these were like future things, for our Myrtle Beach visit, after Daniel spoke those words, or if there's in heaven, I don't know. But then I was at the banquet, and Jesus had a plate of either fruit or cheese or something in his hand, and he was serving us. He was so humble. And I was in this gown, and we danced, and then there was a scene of us making love. And then he gave me a vision of Daniel, and which turns out it's going to be Corinne, which was Guillermo's ex-wife. They got annulled after a few months. But he gave me that vision, and I didn't know who the girl was at the time. I just saw Daniel very happy with this woman, and she was pretty, and he was smiling, and everything was great in heaven. Like, we were all friends, and it was just very peaceful. And so I didn't know, but the Lord spoke June 27th, and now I know why he made that the marriage. So then after that, he had made me meet Guillermo after I told Daniel I was leaving him. And we had to align the planets. It has something to do with Revelation 12. And I don't understand all of it, to be honest. But it has something to do with like the stars being sparked and the voice frequencies of creating the New Jerusalem. And apparently there's going to be Adam and Eve's and soulmates and all of those things. Again, I always test the spirits, because a lot of this is like being revealed in Daniel 12, unsealed. And there will be kings and queens in the New Jerusalem. The Lord has told me a lot. And so that's how all of that happened with him. It was all inspired by Jesus, literally, from the connection to everything, and even the visions. And at first, I definitely questioned it. I was like, this Lord, I don't understand this, and everything. I kept questioning, but he kept confirming it and giving confirmations and explaining more and more and more. And then, the connection was never about lust or anything like that. It was never about that. It was literally just two people coming together as one in marriage. And so he wanted me to explain all that, how all that happened, and then he wanted me to talk about from the beginning and the end. So here we are now, and I moved out. The Lord he spoke the street name to me for my new apartment. He's gave me the name of the apartment, and I started Googling, and I was like, what is this? And then I started looking at apartments. The Lord showed me which one to get. It was the one that had the special, and I didn't know that until the Lord did that. And then the whole time he's been giving me dreams and visions and more prophecies. Well, he speaks in the future, and June 16th was the last prophecy, like the letter to his children. And he's been still pouring his spirit out and giving me things, and I would give things to the people on Zoom, and then all that fell apart because they said I had a divination spirit and I wasn't hearing from Jesus. But all that was prophesied to me, just like he had me, he poured out his spirit on me when I was about to go to the pool, and I was on Zoom, didn't think I was going to release this, and I was just talking to Guillermo, and it was just natural. I was about to go to the pool, and the Lord poured out his spirit and gave me a message. And then that afternoon, he said I had to post that Zoom, and I knew people were going to come against me. But he told me every little step, and he even showed me in the Zoom, poured out his spirit again while I was driving, and said why it was important. And it's all to wake up the church. So it had to be drastic, just like he had me get on the video the other day where I was in my towel. I had just gotten out of the shower, and he had Guillermo do a video, and I walked by, and I could hear thoughts of the Lord saying, okay, now get in the camera and talk. Literally, he was guiding it all, and he did it for a reason. And it was to wake up his people, because they're not going to understand when we get raptured why we got raptured, because people are saying we'll be left behind because we're sinning, we're adulterers, whatever. But the Lord has not called me an adulterer, because he ordained us to be together. And dying to the law, and I don't know what verse that is, but the Moses law of marriage, and talks about the spirit. He's also talking about dying to the flesh and walking in the spirit, not necessarily death, because he talks about spirit at the end. So again, I've done everything Jesus has asked me to do. People think I've lost my mind and I'm not being myself. I've literally checked out of the world. I left my job the first time because people threatened my job, and then Jesus held my hand during the meeting. I still continued to speak for the Lord, and then they let me go. I had just spent like 25 grand on promotions for that company, and I let it all go for Jesus. And then he found me a new company that didn't care, that was more Christian-like, and just understood. And even though they tried to do it again, go after my new job, but it didn't work, because they knew my story. They didn't care. And then my church let me go from the worship team, so I left that church, which I think the Lord was getting me out of church anyway, because any church that's not talking about the end times and how Jesus is coming is not walking in the Spirit, and you don't want to be in those churches anyway. So he pulled me out of that, and those are just some of the things that I gave up. And then the marriage thing, I trusted him on blind faith, and here we are now. I'm just waiting on the next step. I think that's all Jesus wanted me to say. It's a very, very long video, but basically this whole thing has been inspired by Jesus from the very beginning. I take everything to him, and I don't understand it all. He said we'll know a lot more in heaven, but basically everyone will have an Adam and Eve. They'll be partners. If you're not with your partner now on earth, you'll be with your partner in heaven. But anyway, okay. I think I covered it all. Just make sure. See, I'm praying to the Lord right now, and I'm asking him if there's anything else. He said, my child, you've done a good job. Thank you. So he asked me to speak all this today, guys. Everything I do is for Jesus. I worship him. I pray to him. I read every day. The Bible messages literally, they match what's going on in my life. The songs that I listen to match my thoughts. It's all supernatural, and I know it's Jesus. And he loves everyone. He wants everyone to know that he came in the flesh. He died on the cross for us. He bled. He shed his blood so we would be saved. He came in the world not to condemn it, but to save the world. And people are still relying on themselves and the laws. And it's not a license to sin, because you love the Lord. You have reverence for the Lord. You want to please him. So that's basically, you follow him. You pick up the cross and follow him. And you don't know where he's going to lead you, just like Abraham didn't know what he was going to have to do to his son, but he just followed him in blind faith. And that's literally what I'm doing. I'm following Jesus in blind faith. And I'm letting him take control of my life and see what comes next. But I know it's him speaking. A lot of the prophecies have already come true in small increments. And now the prophecies are going to come true in a major way, in big increments. He had said that the other day, that there's no more warnings, no more small increments, and literally there's been floods everywhere, earthquakes everywhere. He's really vamping it up. So if you don't know Jesus, call on him today. Ask him to come into your life. Confess he's Lord. Believe in him with all of your heart, that he took away your sins, your past sins, your future sins. Believe it, because he will save you if you call on him with your heart. He loves every one of his children. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to my story, and I had to do it. Jesus told me to. So, all right, guys. Have a blessed day. I love you very much.